Do you think you know everything about the Immortals? If your mind is picturing the movie 300, faceless warriors in what look like samurai masks, then you've fallen for Hollywood's greatest historical deception. What if I told you that this elite core of the Persian Empire was not just a bunch of extras? What if they were the first true professional army of their time, one that outclassed the Greeks in logistics, technology, and most importantly, psychological warfare? The Immortals were not just a guard. They were 10,000 of the best fighters whose number never changed. If one fell in battle, his place was taken by another instantly. It was as if the unit itself was immortal and its formation unbreakable. Today, we're going to dissect this legend down to the finest detail, what they actually looked like, why even the legendary Spartans feared them, and how Persia built its colossal empire on this unbreakable force. Fasten your seatbelts, we are heading 2,500 years back to the heart of the Persian war machine. Let's start with the main trigger, their name. The Immortals is essentially a brilliant marketing move created by their enemies, specifically the Greek historian Herodotus. Based on his writings, he was stunned by their perfect rotation. We can confirm this by reading a few lines from his work, specifically the 7th book of the Histories. And if any of them should die or fall sick, another is chosen to fill up the number, so that they are never more nor less than 10,000. And it is on this account that the Persians give them the name of the Immortals. In Old Persian, they were likely called Anushia, the companions or followers of the king. But the nickname stuck because of their impeccable rotation. Imagine the terror of a Greek hoplite. He's fighting a unit for an hour. He sees his sword run an enemy through, but a second later, in the exact same spot, with the same golden gleam, stands a new, fresh warrior. You kill and kill, but the Persian line remains impenetrable. This was pure psychological terror that broke the will to resist. The Immortals were more than just soldiers. They were considered the elite and the foundation for future commanders. Unlike the citizen militias of Greece or Rome, the Immortals were full-time professionals. Their selection began at a young age, around 5 years old, and included training in horsemanship, archery, hand-to-hand combat, and significantly, high moral qualities, including loyalty and honesty. They weren't merely a guard, they were a versatile elite. The king's personal bodyguards, the best heavy infantry in the empire, and, in peacetime, the garrison troops in the capitals, ensuring order and carrying out the will of the King of Kings. The Immortals, as the embodiment of the Persian Empire's might, couldn't look like common soldiers. Their gear was both luxurious and surprisingly practical. Their clothing wasn't just beautiful, it was a statement of status and wealth. They wore a long, loose tunic called a kandis. Unlike the dull wool of regular soldiers, the Immortals wore fabrics dyed in the most expensive and rare colors. Purple, or violet, the symbol of royal power, or bright yellow or gold. Did you know that the dyes extracted from Mediterranean mollusks were literally more expensive than gold by weight? For material, they only used fine linen or even silk. Forget rough wool. This is Persia. It controlled key parts of the Silk Road. Silk wasn't just for looks. It's very flexible, of course, but, as is often noted, its slick structure could genuinely deflect or weaken a thrusting sword blow. But this doesn't mean they were defenseless. Here is the biggest misconception. The Immortals did not look as protected as the Greeks in their massive, shiny bronze breastplates. Beneath all that luxury, they wore scale or lamellar armor. This was essentially a jacket made of hundreds of small, overlapping metal, bronze, or even thick leather plates. See the difference? It wasn't the massive, constricting bronze cuirass of the Greeks, but the protection was exceptional and, crucially, concealed. Herein lies the key difference that Hollywood completely missed. A Greek hoplite was in essence a living tank. He was slow but incredibly powerful wall. In combat, the hoplite relied only on a frontal charge. And the Immortal? His was a completely different philosophy. He was fast, flexible, and fully protected. His defense was hidden beneath a luxurious tunic. The hoplite was built for one kind of fight: push and stab. He was constrained by his armor. You couldn't move quickly or shoot a bow in it. The Immortal, in his scale armor, moved freely. This protection was invulnerable to arrows from a distance, coped excellently with slashing blows, and, most importantly, didn't stop him from being a multi-tool. He could first unleash a hail of arrows like an archer, and then grab his spear and engage in close combat. Next, the headgear. I'll say it right away, there were no masks. The Immortals wore a tiara or sideris. This was a soft cap of felt or leather that covered the ears, neck, and part of the face, excluding the eyes and mouth. Its main function was protection from the scorching sun, dust, and cold. In campaigns where the army often crossed vast desert and mountainous areas, this was vital. Unlike the movie masks, the real Immortal sideris likely had a decorative element, gold or silver, that allowed commanders to identify the elite from afar. The mask we see in the cinema is a pure invention to make the image appear sinister and barbaric. Regarding the Immortals' weapons, they were perfectly balanced for their tactics, which were far more flexible than the frontal clashes of the Greek phalanx. Their main symbol of power and primary weapon was the Persian spear. We know that in Old Persian it was called arashti. It was a spear about 180 centimeters long, and it had a wide, leaf-shaped iron head, incidentally similar to the spear used by the Spartans. But here is the unique detail. On the butt end of the shaft was a counterweight, shaped like a pomegranate or an apple. Herodotus wrote that common soldiers had a bronze one, but the Immortals was silver or gold. Feel the difference. And this wasn't just for show. This golden counterweight served a dual function. It was not only a sign of the highest status, it perfectly balanced the spear, making it incredibly accurate and fast in combat. A warrior could instantly change his grip or recover the spear after a thrust. Essentially, it was not just a weapon, it was a genuine treasure. Their shield, the ghetto or the geton, was the complete opposite of the Roman scutum or the Greek hoplon. It was a large rectangular shield woven from wicker and covered with leather. It was phenomenally light, 2 to 3 times lighter than a hoplite's shield, but covered the warrior from head to knee. The lightness of the gero allowed them to quickly form a shield wall, a tactic called sparabara. The front ranks stood tightly packed, creating a mobile fortress from behind which the archers could safely deliver devastating fire. This was a combined tactic, artillery bombardment followed by an infantry assault that made the Immortals virtually invulnerable to a frontal attack. As we've discussed, the Immortals were versatile warriors capable of fighting effectively at any range. The Persians were arguably the best archers of the ancient world. Their composite bow, kaman, made of wood, horn, and sinew, had simply enormous penetrating power. Their tactic was simple and effective. They first saturated the enemy with arrows, literally disrupting their formation and morale, and only then, when the opponent was disorganized, did they enter close combat. And here, the akinakes came into play. This was a short, straight sword, similar to a large dagger worn on the right thigh. It was the ideal weapon for close quarters fighting, for penetrating gaps in armor, and for finishing off an enemy. The akinakes was considered the Immortals' personal sword, and often had richly decorated scabbards. Moving from their gear to their daily life, the status of the Immortals demanded a unique approach to their supply and comfort. Their combat readiness was directly dependent on the unprecedented logistics provided by the Empire. Herodotus describes that the Immortals were accompanied by separate baggage trains carrying not only supplies, but also personal servants, exquisite food, water in sealed containers, and most notably, concubines and family members of the officers. This means these warriors went on the toughest military campaigns, but their level of comfort was simply astonishing. For example, a Roman legionary carried all his own gear, almost 30 kilograms, or about 66 pounds. The Immortal, however, traveled in comfort like a VIP. This allowed them to arrive at the battlefield fresh, rested, and well-fed, while the enemy armies were already exhausted by long marches. This difference in physical condition gave the Persians a huge advantage. Despite the luxury, this was an army of strict discipline. Breaching an order, cowardice, or desertion was punished with particular severity because they were the king's personal guard. Their prestige demanded impeccable conduct. But I think that the knowledge that 9,999 identical warriors stood behind you, ready to instantly replace you, created an incredible sense of unity and reliability. Now let's look at the final chapter of their story, how the Immortals performed against Persia's main rivals. First came the Greco-Persian Wars. The Immortals proved themselves, for instance, at Thermopylae, where they suffered terrible losses but accomplished their mission, breaking the Greek defense, including the elite 300 Spartans. This showed that their psychological effect and numbers were a terrifying force. However, despite their valor, the entire Persian campaign ultimately failed, and Greece was lost to the Persian Empire. This was the first warning sign. But their legend finally faded in the battles against Alexander the Great. The Immortals were essentially an infantry elite designed to win through combined tactics and numerical superiority. However, Alexander created a new war machine that made them obsolete. For example, the Macedonian phalanx used spears up to 6 meters long, the sarissa. The Immortals, with their 180-centimeter arshdi, simply couldn't reach the enemy. Their primary weapon became useless. Likewise, Alexander used his heavy cavalry to break the flanks, avoiding a frontal blow against the Immortals. Once the Immortals' formation was broken, their versatility ceased to work. They were defeated not by cowardice or poor armoring, but by a new, more advanced military strategy that rendered their tactics irrelevant. Their immortality fell under the force of military evolution. The Immortals were not just an army corps. They are a symbol of power, logistics, and psychological warfare that held half the world in fear. They proved that strength is not always in heavy armor and a frontal assault, but in discipline, flexibility, and adaptability. They were the first force that truly scared the Greeks, challenging their military traditions. They showed that an army could be simultaneously deadly, luxurious, and perpetually numerous. Considering all the facts, their psychological effect, the spada tactic, and their campaign comfort, could 10,000 Immortals have defeated 10,000 Roman legionaries at their peak? Write your opinion in the comments, and let's break down that battle. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the like button if you found this interesting.